The world of cinema has been shattered by grief. Robert Redford, one of Hollywood's brightest lights, has left us at the age of 89. On September 16, 2025, inside the quiet walls of his Utah home, the man who defined an era took his final breath. His passing sent a wave of sorrow through his family, his friends, and millions of fans who had been touched by his work. For more than 60 years, Redford wasn't just another actor. He was a force of nature. He won an Academy Award for Ordinary People. He founded Sundance, a sanctuary for dreamers and storytellers. He gave us performances that time itself cannot erase. To the world, he was a golden icon, but behind that glow lived a man scarred by pain, loss, and tragedies that never truly healed. Long before the fame, his battles began in silence. Born on August 18, 1936 in Santa Monica, Robert grew up in modest surroundings. As a boy, he was struck by polio, his body refusing to obey him, his spirit trapped in fear. His mother, Martha, refused to let him give up. Night after night, she massaged his stiff legs, whispering hope until he found the strength to stand again. Her love planted in him the resilience that would define his life, but childhood gave him no mercy. By his teenage years, restless and angry, he drifted toward reckless choices and wild nights in Los Angeles. One close call with the police nearly derailed him, until his father's stern hand pulled him back from the edge. To escape the chaos, he poured himself into sketchbooks, sports, and dreams of horizons far beyond his city streets. For a moment, tennis even placed him beside legends. Yet fate was not finished testing him. In 1955, at just 18, the cruelest blow of all arrived. His mother, the same woman who once massaged life back into his paralyzed legs, entered surgery and never came home. What should have been a simple procedure ended in tragedy. Her death left Robert's world hollow. The house fell silent, his father never remarried, and the boy who would one day command the screen was left drowning in grief. The pain followed him into adulthood. He earned a sports scholarship at the University of Colorado, only to lose it to drinking. Humiliation forced him to leave early, carrying shame like a stone on his back. But instead of surrender, he chose exile. He wandered through France, Spain, and Italy, living simply, sketching, painting, and walking under foreign skies until his heart began to heal. Later he would reflect, resilience is rarely loud. It's moving forward when fear has every argument in its favor. By the late 1950s, Redford returned to New York, not as a rising star, but as a wounded young man chasing survival. He studied art at Pratt Institute, gripping brushes like lifelines. Then he dared himself to step into acting, enrolling at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. It was no instant success. His early roles on The Twilight Zone, Maverick, and Perry Mason barely paid the rent. But every small line he delivered was proof of something greater, that Robert Redford refused to surrender. Robert Redford often admitted that the early years of his career were anything but glamorous. It was survival, plain and simple. Yet even survival came with a cruel twist. The very face that would one day mesmerize millions was, in the beginning, his greatest curse. Casting directors took one look at his golden hair and flawless symmetry and dismissed him. Too pretty, too polished, too shallow for real depth. The boy who had once fought to prove he was more than frail, now fought to prove he was more than a face. Then came 1963 Broadway. Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park. Redford, just 27, stepped onto the stage opposite Elizabeth Ashley, and night after night he revealed not just charm, but wit, vulnerability, and substance. The critics finally saw him. The audience roared with laughter and applause. And for the first time, Redford felt vindicated. He wasn't just a handsome face anymore. He was an artist. Hollywood soon came calling. First with small roles, then with bigger parts that grew into unforgettable portraits. But the sting of those early rejections never left him. That wound pushed him toward independence, planting the fire that would one day lead him behind the camera, determined to take control of his own stories. Through the late 1960s and 70s, Redford became untouchable. He was the Sundance Kid in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the sly Johnny Hooker in The Sting, the relentless journalist Bob Woodward in All the President's Men, and the romantic heart opposite Barbra Streisand in The Way We Were. These roles alone could have secured immortality. Yet, even at the peak, doubts trailed him. Was he truly more than a poster? More than symmetry and golden hair? That paradox haunted him. When The Great Gatsby fell flat despite his presence, critics called it a misstep. To Redford, it was a cruel reminder. The so-called golden boy was not allowed to fail. And yet, he refused to retreat. Instead, he threw himself into heavier roles, projects that carried truth rather than escape. He declared that cinema had a duty to mirror reality, however uncomfortable. Many thought he was too serious, but Redford never bent, and then came his greatest test. He stepped behind the camera for ordinary people. Whispers spread. What could a handsome leading man know about directing? Every day felt like walking a tightrope over doubt, but when the film premiered, the world was stunned. It was raw, piercing, and unforgettable. The Academy Award for Best Director followed. For Redford, that Oscar was more than recognition. It was freedom, vindication, proof that he was far more than a pretty face. But he didn't stop there. In 1981, he poured his heart and fortune into founding Sundance, a haven for independent filmmakers. Critics scoffed. Friends warned he was risking everything. Some nights it seemed the dream would collapse. Yet Redford carried it forward, not for himself, but for every silenced voice that deserved to be heard. Sundance became his gift to generations of storytellers, a sanctuary born out of struggle. To the world, Redford's golden age shimmered with light. But behind the premieres and applause was a man carrying invisible wounds, expectation, solitude, and the burden of proving himself again and again. Greatness, for him, was not ease, it was fire. Yet even fire cannot protect the heart. Away from the cameras, Redford found what he thought was a sanctuary. In 1958, at just 22, he married Lola Van Wagenen. Their early life together was simple: borrowed furniture, stretched dollars, whispered promises in dimly lit rooms. For a boy who had known illness, loss, and shame, those years felt like salvation. For the first time, he believed in permanence. But then came a storm crueler than anything Hollywood could write. Their firstborn son, Scott, lived for only a few weeks. The nursery, once filled with tiny clothes and lullabies, fell into silence, silence so heavy it seeped into their souls. Lola, once radiant with quiet strength, was left with arms aching for a child who would never return. Redford, too, was broken. No measure of love or success could undo that loss. Years later, he whispered, "You never heal from something like that. You just learn to live around it." But the truth was harsher. The loss didn't just surround him. It lived within him. It shaped the silences at family dinners, the smiles that never quite reached his eyes, and the unspoken wait between husband and wife when the night grew too quiet. To the world, he was the Sundance Kid, untouchable and immortal on screen. But behind the glow, Robert Redford and Lola carried the silent weight of two sons taken too soon. Their firstborn, Scott, gone in infancy. And years later, their second son, James, fragile from birth, fighting every day for survival. His childhood was spent in hospital corridors, the beeping of machines replacing lullabies. He endured endless treatments, surgeries, even 2 liver transplants. Redford lived a double life, Hollywood's leading man by day, a father in hospital rooms by night, whispering promises he feared he could never keep. And in 2020, when James finally lost his battle at 58, Redford was shattered. 2 sons, lost across decades. 2 silences that no applause could ever drown. Through all of it, Lola stood by him. For nearly 30 years, she carried their family, shielding their children from the chaos of fame, while Redford disappeared into sets. But time wore them down. By 1985, after 27 years, their marriage ended quietly. No scandal, no betrayal, only the sorrow of 2 people who had once clung to each other, now drifting apart. Redford never spoke of her with bitterness. He called her the great love of his life. Yet the collapse of their bond left a wound as deep as any loss he had endured. After the divorce, he moved cautiously through love. There were fleeting connections, moments of warmth with women like Sonia Braga or Lena Olin, but nothing endured. Friends said he could draw you close, but always held something back, guarding a door no one else could enter. It wasn't indifference. It was survival. Redford had lived what most hearts could not: the death of 2 sons, the collapse of a marriage, the fragility of love. He admitted privately, "I always wanted love to steady me, but I also knew too well how devastating it is when it disappears." 2 friendships defined him more than any romance. Natalie Wood, his early co-star, became a sister-like presence, encouraging him when Hollywood's glare felt unbearable. Her sudden drowning in 1981 left him stunned, mourning not just a friend, but the kindness that had once steadied him. And then Paul Newman, his brother, on and off screen. From Butch Cassidy to racing cars together, they shared decades of laughter and quiet understanding. When Newman died in 2008, Redford confessed simply, "There's a hole in my life now." To lose Natalie in midlife and Newman in later years was to feel grief in 2 cruel forms, one sudden, one slow. Both left him carrying ghosts that no fame could replace. To the world, Redford was a legend. But in his final years, he lived in memory, applauding the friends and family who would never return to the stage, and that, more than the applause of millions, was the true story of Robert Redford, the man, not the myth. In the late 1990s, Robert Redford's story shifted. After decades marked by triumphs and scars, he met Sybil Sagers, a German-born artist who lived not by scripts and premieres, but by brushstrokes, silence, and nature's rhythm. Where Hollywood was noise, she offered stillness. Where his past left wounds, she created space. For Redford, meeting her was like rain falling across a desert, unexpected, gentle, impossible to ignore. With Sybil, he didn't have to be the star or the legend. He was simply a man, weathered by loss, but no longer crushed by it. By the time they married in 2009, he was 73. He called it a new life, and those simple words carried the weight of decades of searching. Together, they built not just love, but purpose. In Santa Fe, under skies vast enough to hold grief and grace, they created The Way of the Rain, a fusion of art, music, and Redford's solemn voice, reminding the world of Earth's fragile beauty. To audiences, it was performance. To them, it was prayer. This final chapter softened what all the others had hardened. No longer the young husband struggling for rent. No longer the father at hospital bedsides haunted by silence. No longer the friend watching empty chairs where Natalie Wood and Paul Newman once sat. With Sybil, he found stillness. Healing, he discovered, wasn't the absence of scars, but the presence of grace. She didn't demand he be a legend. She simply held him steady and whole. But even gentle rain must end. In his last years, Redford's once vigorous stride slowed to careful steps. His voice, once powerful enough to command theaters, softened into a fragile murmur. Still, his mind stayed sharp, anchored always to Sybil, the woman who brought him peace after decades of storms. And then came September 16th, 2025. In his home in Sundance, Utah, beneath skies he had always loved, he breathed his final breath. There was no spectacle, no fanfare, just silence. For the world, it was the end of an era. For his family, it was devastation beyond language. Sybil clutched keepsakes, still carrying his touch. His children wept, not for the Hollywood icon, but for the father who had been their scarred yet steady anchor. His absence reopened every old wound, the infant son lost, Jamie's decades of suffering, the deaths of friends who had defined him. Now it was his family who bore the silence. Headlines screamed of a Titan's fall. Tributes poured in from actors, presidents, directors. But in Sundance, mourning was quiet. His family grieved in raw absence, not gilded myth. They will carry him forward in memories, in storms, in rainfall, in silence. Because Robert Redford's greatest legacy wasn't Hollywood glory, it was endurance, the human heart's refusal to break even when shattered. To the world, he will always be the Sundance Kid, the sly brilliance of The Sting, the urgent voice of all the president's men. But his greatest role was never on screen. It was how he bore grief without surrendering to it, carried beauty without being blinded, held fame without selling his soul. Sundance, the dream he built in 1981, remains his truest monument, a sanctuary for voices the world might have silenced. He nurtured it like a gardener protects fragile roots, never for himself, always for others. Even as his health declined, unfinished sketches and campaigns lingered on his desk, work still glowing inside him, proof of an artist who never stopped searching. Robert Redford's story endures not because it was perfect, but because it was human. He lost sons, friends, and love itself. Yet he never stopped creating, never stopped believing. That is why his passing feels unbearable, because he showed us that true greatness is not ease, but fire. So how do we honor him? Not just with headlines, but with remembrance, with gratitude, with whispered stories passed through generations. The curtain has fallen, but his echo lives on. In filmmakers he lifted, in audiences he moved, and in every heart that refuses to surrender despite sorrow. Robert Redford may be gone, but his presence will never fade.